So I'm going to post the link any second. See if this works. Directing to YouTube. Here we are. Okay, Lizzie, we're live now, just so you know.
Right.
And I'm now posting. Right. So Lizzie, you and I are live on YouTube.
Great.
We go. And I'm going to do a very strange thing, which is I'm going to wave my arms around so that when we come to edit this video, I can find this bit. After our 15 minutes, Lizzie and I have spent 15 minutes kerfuffling around with technology, trying to see if we could get ourselves online. And I think we are now online. I think that where Facebook has not met us this morning, YouTube is doing the deed that we want it to do. So I want to start properly. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, Lizzie, so we finish at about the right time. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin. We are here for Turning Towards Life. It is Sunday morning here in London, and we've just spent an enormous amount of time trying to get ourselves online in the face of all kinds of technical difficulty. And I have been wondering, Lizzie, as we've been doing this, whether, given how things are going in the world at the moment, and given how much social distancing so many people are having to do, how much we are having to keep physically apart from one another, whether what's happening is that there's been this huge demand for this extraordinary technology that we now have available to us because everybody's online at the same time. And I think we might start to find, I've been wondering if we might start to find over the coming weeks that we find ourselves in all kinds of new bottlenecks and constrictions there because of how much this is being used. But we are here, which I'm so glad for. And I want to say thank you to everyone who joins us for this, for the hardy, those of you who hung around with us this Sunday morning whilst we posted announcements on Facebook and other places until we could get live online. And for the many of you who I know will be listening and watching after in the coming days on podcasts and YouTube and all of that, thank you for being here with us. Unless you're listening to this some years in the future, it probably won't escape you that we're right at the beginnings of a time in the world where being together and finding ways to be together has taken on, for many of us, a new importance and a new depth. And so I'm really feeling this, Lizzie, that Turning Towards Life, it turns out, is a really wonderful way, might be a really wonderful way for us to respond to the place that the world is in right now. So I'm really glad that we're doing this together.
I'm really glad as well, and I think it's a way of responding, but it also feels to me like a way, in addition to that, of practicing myself. And for you too, it's like I feel relieved to be doing this because it's something to be doing that is in the interests of my sanity. And I feel like in these times, so we're in March 2020, and in March 2020, we're all in a consistent question about what, whether to leave our houses, what to do in the UK. And I know in many, all other countries, I think it is now anyway, because of coronavirus. And I think to be here and to be discussing and feeling into and reflecting on this poem feels like a sensible act, when actually lots of acts feel not very sensible right now, that would be ordinary things to do in life. So I'm really grateful to be here and also to be in some way not like doing something for the sake of it as well, not just being in response to all the stuff that's going on. But I'm finding myself wanting to do things for the sake of themselves that aren't in response or reaction to what's going on in the world, but just in and of themselves are just healthy, lovely, enjoyable things to be participating in. So I'm really glad to be here and to have some respite from the news and to have some kind of practice that's not only centered around the things that often make me feel discombobulated and afraid, but to practice something in love and in connection, and to be with you, Justin, as well. It's very lovely. So I'm very glad to be here. And with Marie, in this lovely poem she's written.
Before we get to the poem, Lizzie, I'd love to just respond to what you just said. This may be so obvious because you said it, but to have practices that we take up that aren't in reaction to the world, as well as doing everything that we need to do to respond to the world, seems, I'm feeling again in your saying it, the depth of it, because I can see how easy it is for me to end up in a sort of a one way, a sort of a one shape relationship to life, particularly when there are dramatic events happening and we're worried about people we love and we're worried about the state of the world as a whole. This certainly is something for me, and I know for many others, that we can come back to, that stays steady right in the middle of it, just because we do it.
Yeah.
So yes, just feeling my gratitude that that's what we're up to.
Also, I just have another thing to say. Somebody was just commenting on our little kind of haphazard Facebook Live broadcast, and she said it feels better if it's live. And I completely agree. Like you cleaning your glasses and me having just spilled my tea, and the fact that I've got 2 cold pieces of toast sitting here that I haven't eaten yet, but had a bite of the Marmite one, which is very nice. And the fact that I got up very, very early with my baby daughter, and I'm feeling slightly jaded and haven't actually had a shower yet. Like the reality of each other's lives feels really important right now. That this isn't some kind of polished something, but we are ordinary, just like whoever's listening is just ordinary, maybe in your pajamas on a Sunday morning, maybe out walking your dog, maybe listening on a podcast and you're a bit disheveled or whatever it is. And just that the live nature of this somehow in this particular moment feels really important as a way of connecting that's just normal and real, given that we can't see each other in body right now as well. Somehow our realness feels even more important, and it feels comforting and like we're not alone. So thank you everybody for being here and for just being willing to participate here with us in whatever way you are. It's very lovely. So now, should we get down to the business of
Let's
Marie
do it.
Howe? So this is called The Affliction by Marie Howe. And here we go. So just for all of us, including me, obviously, I think we just take a second to just feel where we are in our bodies and notice if there's any tension. Probably is, because we're all somehow hunched, aren't we? So I'm just going to sit up a little straighter and take a deep breath and see what I can do to receive this a little more fully than I might have done before I had a breath. When I walked across a room, I saw myself walking as if I were someone else. When I picked up a fork, when I pulled off a dress, as if I were in a movie. It's what I thought you saw when you looked at me. So when I looked at you, I didn't see you. I saw the me I thought you saw, as if it were someone else. I called that outside watching. Well, I didn't call it anything when it happened all the time. But one morning after I stopped the pills, standing in the kitchen for 1 second, I was inside looking out. Then I popped back outside and saw myself looking. Would it happen again? It did a few days later. My friend Wendy was pulling on her winter coat, standing by the kitchen door, and suddenly I was inside and I saw her. I looked out from my own eyes and I saw her eyes, blue-grey, transparent, and inside them, Wendy herself. Then I was outside again, and Wendy was saying, "Bye-bye, see you soon," as if nothing had happened. She hadn't noticed. She hadn't known that I'd been there for maybe 40 seconds, and that then I was gone. She hadn't noticed that I hadn't been there for months, years. The entire time she'd known me. I needn't have been embarrassed to have been there for those seconds. She had not noticed the difference. This happened on and off for weeks, and then I was looking at my old friend John. Suddenly I was in, and I saw him, and he, and this was almost unbearable, he saw me see him, and I saw him see me. He said something like, "You're going to be okay now," or "It's been difficult, hasn't it?" But what he said mattered only a little. We met in our mutual gaze, in between a third place I'd not yet been.
That really is quite something. And although it's quite long, I'm going to read the whole thing. When I walked across a room, I saw myself walking as if I were someone else. When I picked up a fork, when I pulled off a dress, as if I were in a movie. It's what I thought you saw when you looked at me. So when I looked at you, I didn't see you. I saw the me I thought you saw, as if I were someone else. I called that outside watching. Well, I didn't call it anything when it happened all the time. But one morning, after I stopped the pills, standing in the kitchen for 1 second, I was inside looking out. Then I popped back outside and saw myself looking. Would it happen again? It did, a few days later. My friend Wendy was pulling on her winter coat, standing by the kitchen door, and suddenly I was inside and I saw her. I looked out from my own eyes and I saw her eyes, blue, grey, transparent, and inside them, Wendy herself. And then I was outside again, and Wendy was saying, "Bye-bye, see you soon," as if nothing had happened. She hadn't noticed. She hadn't known that I'd been there for maybe 40 seconds and that then I was gone. She hadn't noticed that I hadn't been there for months, years, the entire time she'd known me. I needn't have been embarrassed to have been there for those seconds. She had not noticed the difference. This happened on and off for weeks, and then I was looking at my old friend John. Suddenly I was in, and I saw him, and he, and this was almost unbearable, he saw me see him, and I saw him see me. He said something like, "You're going to be okay now," or "It's been difficult, hasn't it?" But what he said mattered only a little. We met in our mutual gaze, in between a third place I'd not yet been.
Thank you. So beautiful being read to. I almost found myself being whoever this person is. Maybe it's Marie herself or someone she's writing about. I found myself moving as if I was this, having this happen. And there's a way that my mind tries to get around it, but actually in the end what happened in my body was this kind of like a hopefulness about the kind of possibilities around waking up finally from a however many days of not being awake or something. And I feel hopeful about the power and possibility of being connected and really seeing one another and what it can do and what it means to see and be seen as a human being. And that's always possible to do. So I feel like, oh, this has a great importance, this seeing and being seen thing. And because it's so doable, I feel very, very hopeful. And that's the kind of the arc of that poem for me is just, and I think maybe that's why I chose it, because I read it and at the end I get this swelling of like, we can be this for each other. And that really moves me, and I just think it's so beautifully written as well, in a way that I can follow and understand and be in myself and go on the journey with this person as they go on this journey through reflection.
I was I said I'm going to come at it this way, Lizzie, and I've said this many times before. I've talked about my swimming practice lots of times here and lots of times with you. And the reason I want to say something about it is that this first state that Marie writes about not being there and somehow seeing ourselves not from the inside, not experiencing ourselves from the inside, but almost as if we were seeing ourselves in the way that we might imagine that somebody else might see us, like as something on the outside of ourselves, which means that we don't experience ourselves that much as ourselves. I know this very well, and I suppose most of us know it very well. But I know that it's very easy for me to go through life almost like in a trance this way. So I'm functioning and I'm doing things and I'm talking to people and nobody might notice, except some people might notice. There are people in my life that, like the Johns in her poem, who will get it. And for me, the water is a way that I come back to myself. So I can't escape when I'm in the water. It's like if I imagine, I'm going all science fiction here, but if I imagine that what it's like to be on the outside, the way that she describes, at least for me, is almost like being tethered to myself by a long cord, but being far away on the orbit, sort of on the end of a long rope. The water kind of pulls me back, hauls me back, and I'm in the water. And it's like, oh my goodness, here I am. I didn't even know until I was here that I hadn't really been here, but somewhere out there for quite a long time. So I think it's such a fantastic and powerful and also playfully ordinary description of what it's like to live to experience ourselves in one way or another as one or two steps removed from ourselves, and how we can actually go about quite functionally in the world like this, and yet there's a giant distance. The part that moves me the most, the whole thing I enjoy very much, is where she says when John sees her, and it's almost unbearable for him to see that he sees her. And I think that for me, that this gets to the heart of it, which is it's to really let myself be seen by you, by another, is something I long for so much. And it's almost unbearable. And for me, it's almost unbearable for at least two reasons that I can kind of get a handle on. So the first one is that when I let that happen, and I have three reasons. So the first one is when I let that one happen, when that happened, I am robbed of my defenses. So I can feel my own vulnerability and my own presence. And so it's almost like the undoing of that distance itself is kind of unbearable. The second thing is I have to let myself be seen. And what that means is letting myself receive like be the focus of someone's attention. I know that one of my historic ways of kind of getting away from myself is to deflect attention. That's just been my thing. No, nothing going on over here, don't look at me. So I have to receive your attention, which also means receiving your love and your care and your presence and all of that, which is in such a different place. And then the third thing is, and this is what I think is so brilliant about this poem, is that I also have to let me receive me. So in order to be seen by you in that way, I have to also be here. You know, like when she says that she sees Wendy, the actual Wendy behind the eyes. I have to be here, and I have to then feel all the feelings of being alive and being a human. So when I say it's almost unbearable, it's not almost unbearable in a completely unwelcome way. It's also almost unbearable in its total welcome, and it's, oh my goodness, I've been longing for this. Mm. I need to be here, and yet it's also too much all at the same time.
My God, I feel so glad to be in the conversation, to be putting words to this thing. It's so lovely to hear you say those things and to kind of tease it out and have language for it. And I'm just recalling a memory. So I was in Circle once, really quite a long time ago, I think in kind of early 20s. And we had to do this thing where we would each have a go, and the whole circle would say something they appreciated about us. And I remember sitting there and feeling like my whole body was on fire. Like all I've ever wanted was for people to tell me the good things about me, so I would know them for myself and have some confidence, kind of thing. And then when they began to tell me, I was literally like I needed to run, like I needed to get out of there so quickly, and yet it was exactly what I wanted. And as you're saying the things that you're saying, it's really reminding me of that moment and showing me like all of the kind of practices that have been necessary for me to be able to receive those things without being so excruciated. And so when she says, it was almost unbearable, I completely in my body get the feeling of the like you're saying, that the wanting at the same time was the unbearability of the thing being delivered that you want, which is to be seen. So the admission that I'm wanting to be seen, that's what this is all about. And doing the seeing as well simultaneously is a kind of completely natural thing for humans to do. It's like we've got two holes in the front of our face, like that do the seeing. It's like completely front and center, and yet it's embarrassing, or it's excruciating, or mortifying, or whatever. And I also want to pick out this point, which I think you already said, but I just want to say it one more time. Like, I'm being seen by you, and I'm seeing you, but I'm also seeing you seeing me, and you're seeing me seeing you. So there's lots of things going on. So in a way, like, intimacy is really complex because there's so much going both ways all the time from different perspectives. And so what I'm feeling is that I have to do something with my body in order to become bodily defenseless as well, rather than only kind of thinking my way through it. So I'm noticing that there's all kinds of ways my body can kind of tighten, or I can stop breathing, for example, and just kind of be in the unbearableness in some kind of tense way, just to stay in the seat of seenness and seeing. And it feels like a moment to moment bodily relaxing that allows it to happen and be here and be received, and also be present too as well. And it not only be about me being seen, because there's this interwovenness of the experience too. And I'm getting curious about how we might all be able to practice something like this with the people around us, and what it might be like to sit opposite one another if there's someone else in your space with you, and to be in this interwovenness and see what breathing we might do, how much we might wriggle ourselves into relaxation with each other, that we could have this as a way of connecting. So we're not just talking to each other or something, but actually we're facing each other and appreciating each other's presence and really doing a John on each other from this poem, not a Wendy, where we're just maybe ships in the nighting around each other, but to turn towards this piece of life that's in front of us, as just in a way you and I are doing this once a week with each other. And in terms of who we are and how we are in our relationship, that's a huge thing to be doing together. And in this extraordinary articulation of it in this poem, that in a way, when I read it, by the way, I didn't really get that this was what it was about. I could kind of feel it, but in the talking, I'm learning as always. And I love the distinction between the Wendy and the John, because it gives me a clear articulation of, and a question for myself, a reflection for myself. Am I being a Wendy or am I being a John right now with this person in front of me? And what would it take for me to be a John? So I just feel very invited into what it might take, what it might be like to do this, to be brave enough to do this, and really be with people just like this. And interestingly, Justin, I'm watching how the way that we greet one another physically has become a way of being less intimate than just looking at someone and saying hello, because we're not touching each other at the moment in wider circles. It's happened a few times over the last days where I've seen somebody and I haven't kissed them or hugged them, but I've said hello, and it's really exposing. And so I'm also grateful for this, to be here, so that I can bring this into those interactions as well, where I don't have the social smoothing of physicality to get me through greetings.
What an invitation you're making, Lizzie, that in this time where ways of greeting one another that we've become habituated to are falling away, that we might consider a deeper question about how we greet one another and what it is that we're greeting when we greet one another. And the whole time that you were just talking, I was taking up the invitation that you made, that our ability to really greet one another with the kind of depth where I see that you're a person, that there's Lizzie there, and I can see that you see that there's Justin here, and everything that comes from that. I've been taking up the invitation that starts as a bodily something. And I've been doing two things whilst you've been talking. I've been just settling, letting myself breathe much more slowly. But I've also been practicing just letting myself kind of fall your way. And I realized one of the things that's reminding me of is, we talked last time about, I think it was last time, about human beings being depth. And there's a way that we can easily be surface to one another. And when we're surface, we're just in a way, we're just an object. You know, you're the person who I like being with. So you're not yet a person. I'm just enjoying being in this conversation. Or you're the person who I need to avoid on the tube because you're coughing and I'm worried I'm going to catch something from you. Or you're the person who's buying things in the supermarket and I'm worried they're going to run out. Or you're my annoying brother or sister, or any of the things that sort of the object surface ways we can be with one another. and that when we are like that with one another, we're like that with ourselves. So we become surface too. And that knowing, is this amazing line in the middle of the poem where she says, I saw her eyes, and inside them, Wendy herself. So I suppose where all of this is leading is the feeling I have of talking with you, of being with you, of being very deeply reminded that in a simple way of talking about it, there are these two ways we can be with one another. One where we collapse ourselves into surfaces, including ourselves, and one where we know one another as people, and that takes a move that starts as a bodily move of softening ourselves enough. And it also takes letting be, and it also takes letting ourselves be present and feeling all the feelings. Because just looking at you and feeling what it feels like for me to be here with you feels like there's lots of stuff here, making myself, not just what I'm feeling, but making myself available. But as I do so, I can feel myself rounding out again. And that you're rounding out too. And then this very mysterious thing that I'm so glad that she says at the end of the poem, not just because it has something to do with the name of our partnership that gives rise to this, is that there's a third place that we may never have been with somebody, which is the in-between, two actual humans showing up rather than two objects. And my last thing to say on this is, right now at this time of coronavirus, this is to connect with what you said right at the beginning about practice. I think it's really easy. It's easier in a way than it has been ever before for us to treat ourselves as surfaces, dashing around, feeling afraid, worrying, all these things that we, that have their place, and to miss the people who are here, and that paradoxically are being pushed apart from one another. As for any of us who are in a place where keeping social distance, physical distance is being encouraged or is necessary, we might be, like you said about greetings, in one of the better opportunities in human life to practice allowing ourselves and the people around us to be people, of really taking people in, and not just the people we know, but our neighbors who we may never have spoken to. And when we have to go out, the people who we pass on the street or on the bus with us, everyone, we're all in the same situation right now. And what a gift it would be if we could let ourselves be this way more often with one another, because that's where all of the depth and beauty of human life lives.
Mm-hmm. I can feel this kind of freshness to my life force coming in being in the conversation, and I'm just curious about how I do this also just through the week, and someone texted me yesterday who may be listening this morning, I don't know, and he said, "Oh, thank you so much for turning towards life. I've just listened to one episode, I've just found it, and I'm looking forward to listening to the other 120 of them." And when you and I say, whenever we're in kind of some deep doldrum, we often listen to ourselves and feel like it helps. We help ourselves. I'm just wondering whether coming back to the old episodes for me as a practice during this weird time might be really helpful for me. And this connection and this what our relationship is made of, which I experience as a very much mutual seeing, what comes out of that is probably a very healing, connecting something for me. And so I'm just thinking I could have it on my podcast, on my phone, or whatever, and as I'm going to be walking a lot and being in the air, I think, and to feel connected rather than just like I'm walking to pass the time or something. which can sometimes happen to me. It's just I feel kind of agitated and I need to do something, is that impetus can be there, but that it can also be met with a connective tissue as well. And maybe in these times we have to find more practices like that keep us joined together. So it's very lovely to be here, and I'm looking at our time, and I don't actually know when we started because it was such a kerfuffle. But anyway, we are so grateful for everyone, aren't we, Justin? And I feel evermore this is exactly right that we're doing this, and I'm really glad to be here and glad that everyone is up for being here with us. And thank you for joining, and thank you for your own openness and your own realness. And when we're doing this, I often, seeing people's names pop up as who's there on the live stream and who's with us just initially is like 7 people or something whose names, some of which I know and some I don't. I just get great comfort with imagining how everybody's listening and what states of disarray everybody might be in, or tidiness or whatever, but just the real lifeness of everybody. And thank you for your real lifeness and what it brings to us by your being here with us as well. That's very beautiful.
Yeah.
And so we will be back next week on Sunday again. And we're very glad to be continually choosing these sources. And thank you to Marie Howe for this as well. It's a very beautiful poem. So I think that's goodbye from us. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you next week.